camera on.
You are live.
Looks like I've been recording all the sound. Okay. All right, my friends. I want to begin by saying, I'm going to try to. I know this tone is going to be, but I'm really going to. I'm going to probably echoing a lot of things that Shankar said in probably nicer words. But I prepared this address to explain to you exactly the reason that. The real reason why whether Trump gets impeached, whether he gets removed from office by the United States Senate, is really immaterial, because the fundamental problem is that the Constitution gives the United States Senate far too much power that's undemocratic. And as a result, it doesn't actually represent the American people. And therefore, unless California gets a lot more power in that system, so the system is radically reformed in a way which I simply don't believe to be possible politically. And if it is possible, it's only possible by literally threatening that, okay, we're going out the door unless you change. So I begin by saying, first of all, I cannot condemn traitor Trump, Moscow Mitch, and the entire Trump-McConnell gang in terms strong enough to match their crimes. In 3 short years, they have fashioned the Republican Party into an infernal engine of the greatest international criminal organization since the destruction of the German Nationalist Socialist Party in 1945. Even now, as the defenders of law and order descend upon them, the Trump-McConnell gang is threatening the American people with the specter of civil war. If there is to be a second civil war in the United States, let it be prosecuted with such vigor and to such extent that the scourge of white supremacy is wrung out of the American population forever. As for the liberation of California, our love of law and liberty will give us the confidence of all freedom-loving peoples, against which no force can prevail. However, no matter how evil the McConnell-Trump gang are, they are mere thieves and robbers who exploited the fundamental historic flaws and weaknesses in the U.S. Constitution. It is now clear that until those failings are repaired, California cannot remain in the United States. I do not indict the Constitution lightly. As a lawyer for nearly 30 years, I have thrice affirmed an oath to, quote, support the Constitution of the United States. However, I am also under a continual obligation to analyze and explain the law candidly and truthfully, and that includes the U.S. Constitution. Much has already been said about the Electoral College. Now, Trump, the Republicans, and foreign adversaries exploited it in 2016 and will likely exploit it again in 2020. However, the assignment of power to the United States Senate is a much greater threat to democracy in the United States. This power must either be reformed or abolished without delay. Any means available must be used to reform the power of the U.S. Senate, including the threat of California resuming its independence from the United States. The U.S. Senate threatens democracy in 2 ways. First, power in the U.S. Senate is undemocratically assigned by states, not population. And the differences in population between the states of the United States has grown to such an extent that it is both unjust and absurd. Second, the undemocratic institution of the U.S. Senate holds too much power under the U.S. Constitution. The Senate, just to remind you, can block the adoption of any budget or law, prevent the levying of any tax. It, and it alone, determines what federal judges preside over federal courts, what treaties are ratified, what ambassadors represent us, and even what officials are responsible for the executive branch of the government, as well as their potential removal. The undemocratic nature of the U.S. Senate is manifest at the U.S. Census. In 1790, the first census under the U.S. Constitution, the state with the smallest population was Rhode Island, with 68,825 people, including 948 slaves. Versus Virginia, with 787,610 people, of whom 292,627 served in bondage. In other words, the most populous state in 1790 had only 11 times more people than the least populated state. And when slaves were excluded, Virginia had just 7 times more people than Rhode Island. By comparison, California, the most populous state, has approximately 39,865,590 people today, or 69 times more people than the least populous state, Wyoming, which has just 577,737 residents. And yet both states have an equal voice in the U.S. Senate. The unfair division of power of the Senate is so extreme that if California were broken into 53 states, not 3, 53, each represented by 2 members of what now would be a 204-member U.S. Senate. Many of these new California states would have more members in Congress than Wyoming and 6 other existing states. Put another way, Los Angeles County alone, which we're standing in, has more people than 41 states, including North Carolina, Michigan, and New Jersey. The grounds for our grievances are manifest and undeniable. Another consequence of the bias in the U.S. Constitution for small population states is how it rewards states that choose failing economic and social policies that cause people to flee, while punishing states that choose successful ones that attract new residents by the millions. For example, West Virginia, where Donald Trump is popular, I think it's got a net 20% approval rating right now up in West Virginia, lost nearly 3% of its population between 2010 and 2018. And the current unemployment rate is 4.6%. Plus, they have an incredible opioid problem. By comparison, the population of Massachusetts, where twice as many residents dislike Trump than support him, he's like net 32 minus in Massachusetts, increased nearly 1% during the same period, and the current unemployment rate is less than 3%. So states, in other words, states with declining populations are inevitably more conservative than the average states because older people and white residents are the least likely to leave a state, while younger people and minorities are the first to seek brighter opportunities when a state declines. This is why the Republican Party has profited even while its strongest bases of support have shriveled. Some historians and wannabe historians will assert that the flaws in the U.S. Constitution are merely the result of compromises that were made in 1787 to persuade states with small populations to accept the U.S. Constitution. However, as I have explained, the effect of those compromises is much smaller. It was much smaller 200 years ago than it is today. In addition, let's not forget that the U.S. Constitution was written with clauses specifically designed to prevent the U.S. from abolishing slavery. And for the next 70 years, the slave states used that power granted by the U.S. Constitution to prevent slavery opponents from abolishing slavery. Even the admission of California as a free state in 1850 came at the price of a federal bailout of the Texas slave state, to the tune of $10 million from federal money, which, if you didn't know, would be equivalent more than $300 million today. That was the price that the slave states wrung out to get California in the Union. Since the U.S. Constitution was written to be the slave owner's charter, and now gives white supremacists aid and comfort, reverence for the document should be checked by realism. Because the U.S. Constitution is flawed, especially the amount of power it gives the U.S. Senate. And these fatal flaws will remain whether Trump and Pence are removed by the U.S. Senate, and even if they are sentenced to prison. As a result, the likely impeachment of Trump is an immaterial distraction that will not lessen support for California liberation among Californians. And if Trump is not removed by the U.S. Senate, that will only serve to make the need for California liberation more urgent and undeniable. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. All right, question. Anybody here? You good? Yeah, getting close.
Get out. Actually, I can move out.
Anybody here breathe today? Did you breathe? Did you draw breath? Did you fill your lungs? Did it hurt? Didn't, did it? Doesn't hurt. We're in Los Angeles, California, in the middle of brush fires and so forth. But it didn't hurt to breathe, and it hasn't always been that way. Our land, our air, our water are under threat. To roll back regulations to what they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when at this time of year, with this type of weather, you wouldn't be able to draw a full breath without it being painful. And this is coming about because of what? One man and his appointments, who's been under investigation for the entire 3 years he's been in office. You have somebody whose legitimacy as president has been in question from day one, making policy that will affect the very health, lives, livelihoods of 40 million people here in California, and we're not even sure he's a legal president. How many years will it take to get us back to where we are now if this is allowed to go through? Right. It's not the impeachment process that's a problem. It's not talking about his economic policies, which have been a disaster. What makes a country? What makes a land? What are we part of? It's not this. This is cloth. You know, it's the land, the air, the water, and the people who live there. That's what makes a land. That's what makes a country. That's what makes a nation.
Right.
And it is under attack. It is under direct attack from somebody that we're not even sure should legally be president and may be out the door in the next 6 months to a year. Does this make any sense? That's what I'm upset with this administration about. Our land, our water, our air. We live here. This is ours. That coast, we are the ones who have to live with whatever happens off the coast. We are the ones that have to live with poisoned water if he dumps industrial waste into it. We have to breathe the air if he rolls back regulations. These things are not negotiable, and we can't get away from them. We can't buy a new ocean. We can't buy a new country. We can't buy a new atmosphere. Somebody 3,000 miles away who may or may not be a real president gets to destroy this, even though the people, 40 million people in California, don't want it. The auto industry doesn't want it. The agriculture industry does not want this. Even the oil industry hasn't been that quick to drill off the coast of California. The only person who wants it is one orange, vindictive man, 2,500 miles away. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Full disclosure, I am one of those who maintain that a system in which the overwhelming majority must sell power over their work for paychecks is irreconcilably opposed to democracy. Okay, and I see the United States as being defined by that struggle between capitalism, let's call it what it is, and democracy. So I too am old enough to remember when you couldn't trust air you couldn't see and water you couldn't chew, and it was bad. Yes, I remember what it was like when it hurt to breathe. Okay? And I'm sure my lungs remember too. So over these years, what I've seen terrifies me. Because, first of all, I watched the party in which I was until 1992 taken over by those who had a secular faith in the power of markets. Okay, they had won in what had been the Soviet Union. They won in Mexico with the ruling party. They won here with the Democrats. They won in the UK with New Labour. I saw that. And that's when I ceased to be part of the duopoly in the United States. So I knew what I was against. And I knew in broad and general terms what I was for was democracy. And the more I observed, the more I knew that one or the other was going to triumph. Okay, either capitalism or democracy were going to triumph. So I saw Trump coming as early as 1992. Not Trump specifically, but somebody like him. And finally, and other things intruded too, of course. 9/11 became the Reichstag fire of the United States. Okay? That is when I got really scared, because I knew the fear that we are palpably experiencing now would set in. And it has, big time. All these things help Trump. Why? Because, awful as he is, he's not a political professional. He's a media guy. He's sort of like his predecessor from Austria, who became a German citizen, who wasn't a political professional either, but he was real good working crowds. He would be up here and he'd say things that would make no sense if you wrote them down. Okay? But he would work audiences like you, like me. And he would, talk about this and that, and people's eyes would start glazing over. And you talk about something else, they start leaving the room and going, making restroom breaks, and they'd hit something, and they get like this. And they'd hit it harder, and they get like this. And he hit it harder, and they get like this. Okay, and they would do the work for him and say things like "send them back" and all that sort of thing. And that's when you knew he had him. Okay, that's how his Austrian predecessor worked. So we got somebody like this. That's the bad news. We are there. Okay, fascism is upon the United States. They're this close. Okay, the last pieces are falling into place as we speak. That's the bad news. But the good news is that here in California, the idea that we could reclaim our national identity went from being a few forward-looking people, and that wasn't me, by the way. That's some other people in the room here were looking before Trump at this, to 1 out of every 3 Californians. Right on. Okay. It's the rule of thirds. It often happens in politics. 1/3 for, 1/3 against, and the other third is what the other 2/3 are working on. Okay. So we're at that point in California. But again, there are stronger support in communities like immigrant communities and so on, which is not surprising, okay, for our independence. And in that other California, Baja, support is even stronger. They're at the point that Catalonia was when they declared their independence. They're right there. And what they're saying, what they have confirmed in their consultas, their polls, is that if California liberates itself from the United States, we want to go with you guys. Okay, it would be hard for us as the peninsula. It would be easy for us as the reunified, Las Californias. Okay, so Trump, you have opened the gates that you have no idea how to close, because there is many of us just here in Alta California, or what's left of it after the eastern portions were taken from us when your country conquered ours. There's as many of us, more of us than Canadians, and we have a larger economy than Russia and a much smaller landmass. You don't think we can defend ourselves? We don't want to have to do that. We do not want to have to do that. There are fortunately a lot of people in the U.S. that agree with us. You know, we've talked to them. This is, good riddance, hasta la vista, baby. It is a good thing. If those who buy power over us for paychecks dare try to stand in the way of our liberation, that's their headache. Okay? We will be free. Viva California.
Viva California!
Libre!
Libre!
Jingles. That's a little scary.
Are we going? Let me just start by saying. This. My premise right here is that, and it always has been, and it's been hard to prove even to people in this organization, although now we're all coming to the same conclusion, that the U.S. is broken. It's been taken over. It's a kleptocracy. It's a plutocracy. It's been taken by the wealthy, the 1%, 2%, the powers that be. But over time, it's not just Trump. Trump is the culmination of all this. It actually started in the 70s. There was a famous paper written that was called the Powell Mandate that a lot of people don't know about. But it was basically an outline of what the rich should do if they want to keep power and get rid of democracy slowly, because in a democracy, your power is taken away from you. So they had a mandate, and he specifically said what they should be doing over time. And this is where it started, and they've done an excellent job at it under everybody's noses because it's been over time. So I'm not going to go into that, but that was the 70s. I saw much earlier than Matt, 1980s, when Reagan came in. I saw the precursor of what was coming, and that scared the hell out of me. That scared the hell out of me that Americans would even vote for that. That again, just like Trump, we were just as shocked then as we are now, but we've forgotten because they keep progressively getting worse as we go. So I saw that early on, and he got a second term, and he basically started dismantling, doing what the powers wanted him to do, deregulating, trickle down theory that was trickle up, taking unions out, and so that was the first tier of starting to dismantle democracy. Then it was done along the way, and what I want to say, it's not Democrats, it was taken over. Democrats, I always say, and Republicans or politicians are just puppets. There's a hand up there. We don't see them. They're the wealthy. They're the ones. They're the Walmarts. We don't even know where they are in there. But they're all using the senators, the Congress, people to manipulate them into doing their bid. That's why no matter what, we've seen Democrats like Clinton or Obama, nothing ever changes, really, because they're doing the bidding of these powers that have taken them through, of course, lobbying, through money in politics, and therefore the Senate, the whole principle of the Constitution was to give people a power that's been taken away, and now it's been given to them. We do not have power at all in making decisions, whether it's California, whether it's this, and so. But my biggest point, which I would say for anybody that says that we can possibly get this system back, and it's been said in these discussions that if we could fix it, if we could fix the Senate, if we could fix these things, if we could do that, then it would be okay. But we can't. And the one moment that I positively knew that was after 9/11 and the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act actually was completely a knock in the head of the Constitution. I mean, you cannot say that if you're considered an enemy combatant, which at the time was more like racial type of thing, you cannot say that you do not have rights, that we can come in the middle of the night, take you away to Guantanamo or somewhere else. Your family will not know where you're going. Congress has no rights either. You can go to your congressperson and say, please, I want to know where my family member is. No, you got a Gestapo already in place right there. Then they furthered that with the Patriot Act 2 that I call, that everybody was okay with that because it was, racial profiling. But then after the shoe bomber, we had an American that was supposedly influenced by terrorists. And so they said, well, look at this. Now even citizens, American citizens, can be considered enemy combatants. So that means any one of you, white, black, whatever, that they deem like a threat. And that's what it was. It wasn't really particularly for terrorists. It was to control population. And so now they've instilled these laws, which led to ICE, by the way, which has the same thing, where you don't need any warrants, where you don't need that. That was automatically to keep people in check and to go after people. Now, we're not there yet, but I think we will get to that point where if they're threatened enough, they're capable of sending ICE to us or to California or like they did in Catalonia to remove officials or things like that. And they have the right, not under the Constitution, under something that supersedes the Constitution, which is the Patriot Act. Okay? You cannot say that. You cannot say you're a democracy and make an exception going, except for this, then you're not a democracy anymore. So that being said, once we see that we believe there's no way we're ever going to fix this government, what is the logical choice, and what is it that we have to convince Californians especially, is that it is broken. The system is broken. Californians do not believe that per se. They think still that it can be fixed because if we remove Trump with this impeachment, then we can get our country back. It's a Trump thing. It's it's the Congress thing. If we can remove these cronies, these people that have usurped the power, then everything will go back. And we've done this over and over. They did it with Obama. No, it didn't go back. It never was, whether it was Bush, whether it was all the Bushes, whether it was Trump, whether it was Clinton, we have never been changed anything in our favor, and particularly in California. And so how long, I'm asking this to Californians, how long are you going to take this? How long is it going to take another 5 presidential elections for you to see that nothing ever changes? That, yeah, there might be a nice speaker like Obama or Clinton, and you're going, oh, wow, look how everybody likes him and stuff. But they don't do anything. And then they bring in a Trump, and then everybody's going, oh, shit. And then they're appeased again by some guy that speaks well and stuff. How long are we going to keep on doing that? And that Californians are going to see finally that the system's broken. You can't fix it, and that's why we keep having this. And Trump is the epitome of all this that's been going on for a long time, that's led the nation to this. And we are facing the biggest enemy, the biggest empire, because make no mistake, the U.S. is an empire. An empire is, by definition, an occupier of other places like Iraq, like Afghanistan, like bases all over the world. We're facing, as Californians, and the world also, the biggest threat empire that's ever lived, the biggest army ever put together. And these people will do anything to keep power. Okay? So I don't want to get into the potentials of what will happen. All I can say is empires come and they eventually crumble. All of them, there's no exception. It will crumble. Not in our lifetime, maybe, but it will eventually implode itself because they can't keep the resources all over the world going, and people will revolt eventually. Now, we can't wait for that as Californians, because by that time, they'll have done so much damage to California that we may not even be able to speak independence or anything. So I just want to say we have to be ready for a big fight, and we have to start to fight like them. We cannot be nice anymore. We have to take the gloves off. They've taken them off. They have brass knuckles. We're not going to win with a boxing glove with them. We have to stop being, and that's their argument, that we're weak. That, you can do anything to these guys. Look, they never fight back, never do. We have to stop that and say, yeah, we're fighting back. Now, we've had enough. And mark my words, the last thing I'm going to say is we are facing the biggest enemy, and it's not at north of us, it's not the south of us, it's on the east of our border all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. And this enemy is fierce, and this enemy is the enemy of our state.
Y'all are giving me shivers.
Ooh.
Wow.
Well, it's been another week of this debacle. And, to talk about, I'm here to talk about why we need California independence. First of all, we are flying without a pilot. I am a retired nurse, okay? And our current POTUS is showing signs of early dementia. That kind of deer in the headlights look, the searching for the words all the time, and using the same words over and over to make up for it. Also, the paranoia. The paranoia that everybody's against them. It's a vast left-wing conspiracy. Well, I say it's a vast right-wing conspiracy. We're having an explosion of conservative governments all over the world. And, we have this nut job who's on top of that, he's a narcissistic sociopath. And, we're not being led by him, we're being led by our companies, by our multinationals, by our companies. They say, oh, well, let's help the farmers because of this trade war he's gotten us into. No, we're not helping the farmers. We're giving Monsanto a big check so they're not calling every day. I'm sick of using my money to help support these companies that are not paying taxes. Not only that is, when we have, there's this huge, a lot of conservative governments are, when you say conservative, it's really just means big business, really, all over the world. It means here's an open door and an open check and have fun. He's rolled back, EPA regulations, the Paris Agreement, our ability to regulate our own air. This guy's a nut job, and it's all being controlled by these companies, and they're not going to stop. There's a huge amount of money here, people. The Republican war chest is phenomenal, okay? And, instead of continually fighting this, where, we had 50 million and change vote for this nut job, okay? We have a country that's approaching 400 million. If you think about that, that's 1/8 of the population that is controlling all this. And all these things and all this mess is causing people's death, okay? There are people in northern Syria dying right now, okay? Because this guy doesn't have an idea about, foreign policy. There's people dying in Myanmar, We have Facebook that's not being controlled, that's spreading lies, for the buck, really. And, and also I want to talk about something that is really, been a hallmark of the oligarchs and the big businesses. If you regulate us, it's going to prevent us from being able to put money into research and innovation. Okay. This is a bold-faced lie. And first of all, as a nurse, we learned this thing called change theory. Change theory means every change is positive. We had controls on the air here in California. We started, we were the motivators in the beginning of the whole clean air thing years ago, before it ever even started. And I'm sick of being controlled by these multinationals who are making everyday decisions for me. My air, my ocean, my land, fracking without ever, they have earthquakes in Oklahoma, and, essentially, if you're president, you cannot get elected without being supported by the South. And these people down South vote en bloc. And these people down South are so different from us. And I'm sick of, these companies being in charge. I'm sick of him. He's a debacle. This impeachment thing is a nightmare. The money we spend on it, all this money, the money we spend on defense, all this stuff. If we taxed the companies just properly like we are, our big companies, our Silicon Valley could have this state running like a Martin guitar, fine-tuned machine, okay? And I'm sick of being controlled by, which is right now about 1/8 of the population. And that's another problem too, is that there's a huge portion of our population just doesn't care. They're not even voting. And I'm sorry, that's part of the problem too. You don't want to get up, you don't want to vote, you're also part of the problem. You're giving him a vote because you're apathetic, because you don't want change, because, you don't want to have to pay as much. These companies are paying for this narrative. Everybody's buying it except in California. And that's why we need to get out now. Thank you.